Well, it is now 11:48, and they're already popping a lot of firecrackers, but I thought, well, I'm just going to film these orbs up until and past midnight, when in the background you might hear a lot of fireworks going on. So I thought I would talk about something else. I've wanted to talk about how I feel like I'm morphing. I feel like my body is undergoing some kind of strange morphing, because I can feel my scalp, and there's soft spots on my scalp, several of them, and kind of bony ridges. Nobody would notice it because, it's hidden from view by my hair. And that's not the only thing. When I get in water, I float, no matter what position I put myself in. I used to have to swim to stay to keep my head above the water. But now I don't have to do anything. I just, in any position, even if I curl my body up into a ball, I still float, which is really nice when you go in swimming in the ocean and you get back out there past the breakers and you're in the deep water, and the waves aren't breaking and hurting you, they're just going under you, and you don't have to work at staying afloat. It's so fun. I could do it for a long time, and I love that. That still is with me. I've been doing it now for several years. And certain ones have said, well, you have so much body fat versus muscle that is why you float. I don't think so, because I've seen a lot of really heavy people, heavier than me, who have to swim to stay afloat. I don't really think that's the reason. I even float in the tub when I'm taking a bath. My legs float. And it's really strange, but I like the feeling. But it is just something that can't be noticed, we're changing. It's not real obvious to the world yet, but to the person that's happening to, it seems to be obvious. Anyway, I just wanted to say that in case anyone else had any experience like that. Because I do know that we are undergoing symptoms of the ascension. And sometimes they're not pleasant ones. Sometimes they're being a little bit like you got the flu, or you have sinus problems, or you're allergic to everything, or, any number of things. But you do get past that. You do. And I think it's going to be that we get better and better and develop some unusual abilities, like taking pictures of these orbs. For me, that's really strange, because I haven't been doing this forever, just a couple of years now. And some of the people who talk to me, who make comments, they have felt different, even from a very young age. They had certain abilities that made them think that somehow they were different than other people. So we don't know what our past has been, Maybe we're ascended masters and we don't even know it. I've thought that sometimes. But I wanted just to talk about that and be with you in this video as we move into the new year. And now that I've said that, I can't think of anything to talk about else. We'll just look at this and listen for the fireworks to start blasting off, because it is 11:53. And The magic hour of 12 is approaching. Now, is there anything else I could talk about? Let me move to I gotta change my hand. It's getting tired. Now, it's kind of messy here, but can't be helped. Let me see. I could tell you about one time, Bob, my husband Bob, when he was still on this side of the veil, we were driving somewhere and he saw this, it was this Mexican man who was working with concrete. He was smoothing a sidewalk that had just been poured with concrete. And the traffic had stopped so that we were right by where he was, and Bob looked over at him, and all at once, he knew what that man's whole life was. He knew his thoughts, he knew his family, he knew everything, and it scared Bob so much that he felt like he never liked to think that someone could know what he was thinking or know his mind, and he didn't want to know anybody else's. He had so many gifts of that were unusual, but he was a little bit scared of them. He would go out of body a lot of times, he told me, when he was younger, and be in another dimensional place and always having to solve problems. He was in one place where the people knew their thoughts created, but the problem was someone had convinced enough people that they changed the shoreline by the ocean. They changed it to be another place, which, well, unfortunately, you didn't have beachfront property when the shoreline changes, and you might be underwater. But anyway, he was there to convince them that that was a mistake and that they should return their thoughts to where the shoreline was supposed to be, that it had been moved from. And he was there to be a mediator with the people. And he was always solving problems for people in other dimensions when he would go out of body at night. He kind of got tired of doing it. And then one night he got scared because he went out of body and he was in a place where there were these beings who were made of stone. They were big, huge people that were made of stone. And he had a traveling companion that he could hear. And this being told him, these people can actually kill you, and best to not be here. And he said, I dove into the ground to get away from them. Now, I know that sounds pretty crazy, but that's what he said. And after that, he wouldn't go out of body anymore. He was a little bit scared to do it then. So he wasn't your ordinary person. Bob wasn't. We had a lot of experiences. One time, when he was out of work and he was looking for work, and we were living in that hotel room, we'd often go walking around Huntington Beach where we were, and we'd always find pennies, and we'd pick them up, but we'd always curse the penny by what we would say. Bob would say, oh, it's just a penny, and I would say, no, wait a minute. I said, it's just a penny. And Bob would say, well, nobody bothers to pick up a penny anymore. But we'd pick it up nevertheless. And then one day, I had the thought, well, maybe it's just a penny, but maybe I should curse the little penny. I shouldn't say it's just a penny. And I was thinking this. I wasn't saying it to Bob, but I thought, well, if Bob could find a penny, he could find a dime or a quarter. Anyway, so in about 30 minutes we had found ourselves going to the beach to walk the shore because we were right close to it. Bob goes running across the sand and stops, bends over and picks something up, and then calls me to him. And he says, "Look what I found right on top of the sand." And he had a dime and a quarter in his hand. And I was like, "Oh, wow. You don't know what I just thought about 30 minutes ago when we found those pennies. I said you could find a dime or a quarter if you could find a penny, and here you find it in the hardest place to find coins is in the sand." So I always felt like there was something special, that we had divine guidance. And it's a good thing I felt that way, because we had kind of a scary life with him moving every 6 months to a new job. We had to move one time from Maryland to California, and our car was terrible. It wouldn't pull a hill. There's a lot of hills between Maryland and California. But he thought he wouldn't live if he had to go through another winter in Maryland, because they're very cold, and he had to catch a subway to go into his work, and it was so cold. So we took off in that horrible car that wouldn't pull a hill, with all of our belongings packed in it. And we'd go up a hill for like 10 miles an hour up that hill. It was terrible, terrible, terrible. I was scared. I thought, at any minute we're going to break down, and I guess we'll have to call our children to come rescue us or something. And then all at once, it seemed to get worse, because we heard a pop. And then smoke. Smoke came into the car. And we pulled over. And Bob gets out and looks under the hood. And what had happened was the exhaust started coming out under the hood, instead of trying to go out the exhaust pipe in the back of the, in the rear. But it released more power to the car because it was coming out there. It was loud, but we had more power. And then he came back in and he said, "We're going to be all right. We'll make it." And for some reason, I believed him. I believed, and I quit fearing. And we were going faster up those hills, and we made it all the way to California in that car. And when we got there, he didn't have a job. We lived in the hotel room. And Bob, one of the things I loved about him so much was that he was so generous with his children. After his divorce, he always paid even more than his alimony to them, and helped them in every kind of way he could financially. And while we were there, his daughter wanted to borrow $1,000 because she wanted to get this new car, and she had to put money down. And he sent her that $1,000, even though we were really in a dire situation ourselves. But he did it anyway. And she later lost the car. And it got repossessed, and that $1,000 just didn't really help. But nevertheless, things worked out. And that's a story in and of itself, how things worked out about that. But that's what I loved about Bob, is that he was so generous to his children. And a lot of people don't pay their alimony. I know, because that happened to me. I raised my kids pretty much on my own, and when I did get alimony, it was like $200 a month, which didn't go a long way, really. But I always taught my children to love their father, and I let them go visit, and I didn't teach them to hate him. And I'm always happy that I did that, and I didn't get into that way of being where people pit their children against their own parent when there's been a divorce. But anyway, that's all in the past, forgiven and released. But Bob was good for me. We lived together a long time without being married. And then one day he looks at me because he had this memory problem. And he said, "Are we married?" And I said, "No." "Uh-oh, I'm going over 15 minutes. So then we got married. I hope this is going to take, because I only have 15 minutes. Oh, dang.